All right, hi folks. My name is Ted Pavlik. I'm a faculty in Sky. So this is IE 475 simulating stochastic systems. So hopefully you're all in the right place. Here, there's also a lab either on Monday or Tuesday that is either in Brickyard 209 or Brickyard M111, depending on the day. And so, there will be well, we'll get into the details of all of that here in just a second. And so, sure, tab back the PowerPoint here. Okay. All right. So today's basically just an intro to the course, its structure, a rough idea of what we're going to be doing this semester, but we're probably not going to go the whole time here. Just want to make sure everybody's got the policies down. And the biggest place is if I do try to record every lecture and post them afterwards if there's any clarifications, but also at least the most of the stuff today is covered also in the syllabus, and so the syllabus should be up on Canvas. Hopefully everybody's got access to that Canvas page. I'm going to kind of show you how things are organized there. There's a lot of material there between the lectures and the labs, so it can get a little cumbersome, but hopefully try to do my best to kind of structure things so you can get some of the stuff you don't need out of the way, so you can find the things you do need when you need them. So the main places to look on Canvas are the modules is kind of where everything is organized. But if you're looking for something, a specific assignment, you can use these assignments, but those are also mimicked here on the modules. And I'll show you that here in a second. Course, grades, and the syllabus. So all of those things, all of the assignments that I give, I try to make sure there's due dates and availability windows. So they all should show up on your Canvas calendar. I use the Canvas gradebook and all of its features, and so the estimate of its grade there is sort of the best estimate of your grade in the course. And so you can also use the what if grades feature. If you've never used that before, then I explain how to do that in the course information, which allows you to say, well, if I've got a grade coming up, if I pop in a hypothetical grade, how will that affect things? And so if you have questions about your grades or whatever, then always the Canvas grade is the best estimate. There's no like Excel spreadsheet that I'm managing behind the scenes or something like that. So the way that looks, here on Canvas is like what I would recommend when you visit this Canvas page again, because there's a lot of information, is to go straight to the modules, but then hit that collapse all button because there are a lot of modules and there's a bunch of things that after this week you probably won't need, like this course information section, things like that. And then there's other things that maybe sometimes you'll need, but otherwise not, like classroom recordings, for example. That's where I'll try to put, there's a page already in there that'll have the cached recordings there. So that's where you can find those. I do have tried to cache information about the texts. All of that stuff is kind of down through these modules here. So I generally put course information stuff up top. There is this first module's got a couple of sort of syllabus type assignments that you'll have to complete. They're real quick. But once you complete them, then that'll unlock all the rest of the course. And so to get access to the rest of this stuff, you'll have to do that. That's technically, due, I think, I forget what the due date, if it's this Sunday or next week, but I mean, I'm not getting late, signing any late penalties for these assignments because you have to complete them to get access to the rest of the course. So, but they are on your calendar that way. So make sure you do those. That'd be kind of the first priority to do things. And then otherwise, as we go, then you'll find kind of stuff down here in these modules. And so underneath so I've organized, again, so it's a lot because it's the lab and the lecture. And then some people have asked me to do things one way and other students ask me to do things another way. So I've tried to organize things in two different ways. And so if you want to say like, I need to find a lecture, I need to find a lab, I need to find a homework, this is sort of a surrogate for the assignments. So you can find them all grouped by type, but then down below, all of that stuff is regrouped by unit. So some people like to say, well, as we're following along, I'm in week 1, so that's in unit A. So I just want to go to the unit and find all the assignments and stuff there. So it's there. Or other people say, well, I just know I have a homework due, so I just want to go to homeworks. And so again, it looks like a lot, but a lot of it is the same information, just grouped in two different ways because I've taught this course enough that at the end of it, the feedback I get is, boy, I really wish that those assignments were this other way, and so on. So it's kind of accumulated into this giant string of modules, but hopefully you can use it the way that's most useful for you to use it. So definitely get accustomed to that. The modules there, the basic structure of this course, two 75-minute lectures with me. And then there is a lab period, but what we've done with this lab is I have already pre-recorded all of the lab lectures. They're already available right now, and all the assignments for the labs are available right now. And all of the software you can either install yourself or access remotely on the virtual systems. So it is possible to just complete the labs at your own pace. I mean, there's due dates for each lab that you should abide by, but on your own pace without actually stepping foot into the lab. So the lab is really meant to be a forced spot on your calendar where if you want FaceTime with the lab TA for help, the lab TA will be there. You can show up and you can work through your labs that week, during that 2.5 hour block. But if that's not, if you would have other things you'd like to do during that time, then you can feel free to just not come to lab. We're not taking attendance in lab, or only come when you feel like you need it. So you attempt a lab and it's kind of difficult to figure out how to get something working in Arena or some other software platform we're using, then you can decide to come to that lab. So it's kind of like an office hour. It's just meant to sort of be an open lab time for the lab that week. You can feel free to come every week if you'd like, and again, just do your labs there. But if you don't want to come, that's fine. Also, if you find that although you booked the Monday time, the Tuesday time sometimes is better for you, or vice versa, you can feel free to come to either one. So it doesn't matter which one you go to. Again, we're not taking attendance. If you do come to the lab and there's everybody's at all the computers, then preferably then don't go to the lab that's not on your schedule. We want to prioritize the people who actually have it on their schedule. But the class is pretty small this semester, so I don't think that'll be an issue. So again, just emphasizing that. No need to come to lab if you feel like you're happy to do things at home or elsewhere. Just make sure you submit those lab reports by the due dates that are posted. In lecture, and I'll go over this, kind of what the expectations for attendance are here in a second. If you need to email me, I do teach other courses. This is actually some of the smallest course I teach this semester. So most of the emails I get are for the other course that I teach. And so, a lot of times students will say, oh, I'm in your Tuesday section. Well, I mean, all my classes are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so, it's very helpful for me and the TAs if you put IEE 475 somewhere in your subject. It's really nice if you say IE 475 and then give me kind of a phrase summary of what's going on, so I know how urgent it is. But if you do that, then I've got filters that'll bring it to my attention. If you don't do that, it can get lost in other emails, or it can be difficult for me to sort of parse out, which class you're from and those sorts of things. And it just takes, longer for me to address your issue. So please put that in the subject when you email me. Feel free to email me. There's a Slack for this. Feel free to Slack me. You can DM me, or you can post to the general group. However you're most comfortable, that's fine. And then, lab-related emails. So if there is a lab issue, say a lab report grading issue, make sure that you either only email the TA or email the TA and me. If you email me and say, I'm not sure about this grade that I got on this lab report, the first thing I'm going to do is email the TA and confer with the TA just to make sure there's uniformity across grading. So I'm going to have to get the TA involved anyway. So it'll just be faster if you just email the TA directly or email the TA and me, simultaneously. But don't just email me about the lab issues, because again, I have to get the TA involved. But likewise, emails, very helpful if you put that subject in there. Okay, so how many of you are taking 470 right now? Okay, so quite a few. That's good. This class will be complementary to 470, I think. It'll also involve a lot of things from 380 and 385, and so hopefully it will help support that material too. This is basically a course which is trying to get everyone to identify, model, and analyze stochastic systems. So that stochastic is the link to 470. But instead of using a mathematical framework like you do in 470, we're using a computer simulation framework. So in 470, you're learning sort of about the kind of mathematical regularities that occur when things arrive randomly to networks and other sort of queuing systems, and how to merge them together and how to do design with those conceptual models and mathematical models. Here, we talk about systems that are built from similar stuff, but are built in a way that makes it intractable for them to analyze with the methods that you can do in 470. And so instead, we build simulated versions of those things and then run statistics on those versions, which is where the 380 and the 385 will come up. So all of this stuff will become clear after next week, but formally, that's what we say that the course is about. So that's kind of what I'm kind of summarizing here. I have to give course objectives. But that's roughly what it is. So those of you who have taken 470 or are taking 470, I really think it's great if you can sort of try to imagine these two courses being like a yin and a yang that kind of fit together. So one has strengths and weaknesses, the others have strengths and weaknesses. And ultimately, when you do operations research work with these types of systems, you're going to be using methods from both. Okay, so again, this is just sort of summarizing the stuff kind of straight off the syllabus. Basically, this first part here is, when have I found a system that is best for 470 methods or for 475 methods? Like, that's like a big part of this course is, and when you do your final projects, that will be a big part of scrutiny. Is like, well, why did you need to do a sim? Can't you just use Little's law that you learned in 470 to analyze? Wouldn't that give you the same result? Those sorts of things. So identifying when do you need to escalate to simulation versus these other times when you can just use the simpler methods from 470. All right, so the way that's structured is, before the midterm, we kind of got fundamentals. So introduction to simulation, the DES simulation, the different types of sim, a reminder about probability stuff, so 380, 385 stuff. And then finally, we get into how to generate random numbers, which will be really important for stochastic modeling, as we'll see, and how much can we trust the random numbers that are generated in computers, and then start to use them in sims. And that'll bring us up to a midterm, or the midterm, right in the middle here, which, and I'll explain what I mean by a two-stage exam here. This basically, again, covers these kind of fundamentals. Then we launch out of the midterm and get into the specifics of more advanced sort of simulation, or more specific simulation ideas. And so when we're actually building a stochastic model, what are the particularities and how you build that sim, how you make sure you've built a good sim, how you analyze the outputs of that sim, and some applications. And so after all of that, then we'll have a final, which is cumulative, but because these topics build on these topics, it will be focused mostly on these topics, but it's kind of impossible to remove this from that. So by focusing on these topics, we'll actually be kind of testing you on that. So technically it's cumulative, but really it's going to be focused primarily on the back half of the course. So, and again, I'll explain what this two-stage exam here is in just a second. So that's the basic outline of what we'll be doing. The labs are meant to support that. So the labs kind of flow down through what is a sim, what are the different types of sim, and then we start using, in the back half of this course, this program by Rockwell Automation called Arena. This course is not meant to be to suggest to you that Arena is the only simulation platform you can use. It's far from it. It's a conventional simulation platform used in courses because it was one of the first to have a textbook in that. So it's very arbitrary. It's not a great program. I don't want to say I endorse it or whatever. I never used Arena before I started teaching this course, but if you learn to use Arena or any of these others, it's so easy to flip over to FlexSim or AnyLogic or whatever. So once upon a time, we used to have IEs take 475 and 477. Now EMs take 477 and IEs take 475. But the program that they used in 477, AnyLogic, also does everything that you can do in this course. They use it to do a different type of sim in 477. But we originally, because there were students that would take both, we helped that would expose them to a diversity of different sim platforms. But as we had to kind of squeeze the schedule to get students out a little bit faster, then the IEs specialize in 475 and the EMs on 477. So you don't see many simulation platforms But again, I don't want to make it sound like this is an Arena class. Arena is just a platform we picked for this class, but all the stuff you learn in this class applies to 100 other DES simulation programs. I do try to introduce you to a couple other platforms like NetLogo, which is an agent-based modeling platform. ABM is becoming increasingly more important for IEs to know. And again, that's just one platform out of many. That's a very simple platform we can drop into a lab and you don't have to learn a whole lot about it. Whereas Arena, we really take the back half of the semester to really get into Arena to build realistic models. And then there's a final project that's kind of mixed into this, which I'll talk about here in a second. And that's about it. So like I said, the TA can provide in-person help during the lab sections. The labs also can be completed ahead of time. So I'm just emphasizing this. If you have better things to do with your time Monday and Tuesday than coming into lab, you don't have to come into lab. The lab is meant to be an opportunity for you to get help from the TA. If you don't need help from the TA, if the labs are pretty self-explanatory, then you can just go to each lab on Canvas, watch the recorded video, or look at the recorded lecture, and then follow the instructions and work through it that way. All right. So I will pause for questions here in a bit. I just want to get through the fundamentals because some of the questions I think will be answered here. So there are 2 textbooks that I require, but I say see Canvas for access options. So as you'll see, I think you won't need to purchase a textbook. I think I give you ways to get this material on Canvas. So take a look on Canvas to see what I mean by that. Look under the modules there. But one thing I will mention is that just this year, they brought out a new version of Simulation with Arena. The last version, I think, was 2014. So it was like a 10-year hiatus. And the big reason they brought that out was that between that version and the version of Arena that was released a couple of years ago, they made major user interface changes in Arena. It still does everything it used to do, but they just put kind of a different cover on it because they sort of got feedback that it was a better kind of cognitive fit to change the user interface. So older versions of this textbook, technically you can get by in the lab with older versions of this textbook, but if I'm having you do an exercise which is based on something in, say, chapter 4 of this, then the screenshots that are in those older books will not look like the current version of the software platform. It's easy enough to find all of this stuff, and I will show you the mapping from old to new because there's a bunch of Arena resources out there based on old stuff. But if you want a textbook that is updated for the current version of the software, that's why this new version that came out just this year is out there. And so, that'd be something that to look for. But if you have, again, look on Canvas to see what I've given you and see if that's good enough. But otherwise, if you can get access to an earlier version of this text, that'll be fine for the labs. You just might, if you have trouble finding things, just let me know, and then I can show, oh yeah, that thing that was in the old version, it's now over here. I can give you those instructions, and I'll try to do that as well, both in these lectures and in the lab stuff as well. So those are the texts that I want. Like I said, prereqs, a little bit of programming, but the programming we do is visual. So you're not going to be writing code exactly. You'll be writing expressions and drawing connections between components. And then probability, that's kind of the bigger thing, is that we are going to lean a lot on probability and stats in this course. So each one of our lectures has got in brackets a chapter after it. Those refer to this text. So if I say something that is a little confusing, but you just want someone to hear it from someone else, then go in and check out these chapters. And so that's where you can go to study for these things. Is just look for the brackets after each lecture. Other materials. So Arena, you can download a free version to your own computer. It is a Windows program. So if you have a Mac, you'll need something like Parallels or VMware or VirtualBox running Windows to run Arena. That's how I run Arena. It's totally fine to do that. The other resource, though, is that you can find it locally, but then also if you notice on the left-hand side of Canvas, there's this Aporto, it says Sky General Lab. If you click on that, that will open up a Windows machine inside a web browser that has Arena on it. So you can access Arena remotely. Depending on how many people are accessing that machine simultaneously, it can get sometimes a little slower than real time, but it's not too bad. And so remote access is available for those who don't want to install it locally. But if you do install locally, it does make it a little more convenient. The student version of Arena has some limitations on how big the models you build are, but for most things you do in this class, that limitation won't be a problem. Maybe for your final projects if you get really ambitious. And so theoretically, the version that's installed on ASU resources, so in the Brickyard and on the remote cloud, don't have that limitation, but it's not that big of a deal. So I think the student version on your own machines is totally fine. Other resources is there is every semester IISC runs and Rockwell run a competition, an international competition where they will release a prompt, I think I don't know, it's like they release it at the end of September or something like that, where they give you a bunch of data and a problem prompt, and then you with a group of, I think, 3 other students will end up, can respond to that by submitting a simulation to this competition, and then it has monetary prizes and things like that. And so if you're interested in that, and then if you do decide to do that project, then you can actually use that in your final project, which we'll talk about here in a second. Not a lot of students do the competition, but we certainly will support that. And they're even, I think there's like a $20 registration fee. And I think Sky's got some money in the budget that for a group that does want to do that, I think we can hook you up so that we can cover that registration fee if you're interested in that. It is very competitive. So but it's a nice experience, and it's a very practical problem, and it's at a bigger scale than most of the projects that we do in this class. Other materials, like we will be using spreadsheets to do some data analysis. So having Microsoft Excel available or Google Sheets is, either one will be fine for what we do here. And then generally other statistical tools are always helpful, but definitely not required. So some of the ones here are, but the big thing here is, having access to Excel and Sheets is probably the most important thing, at least early in the class. Otherwise, like NetLogo, that's another one we'll do one lab on NetLogo. That's a free download, and there are instructions on Canvas on how to get that. That's another one that it's nice to have. We also have it on the ASU resources too, so it's already installed there. But this is multi-platform, Mac, Linux, and Windows, so easy to install for everybody. Okay, so the way, and again, I'll take questions after I get through the grade breakdown. So this is the stuff that you'll be responsible for in this course. There's this lecture attendance. So I mentioned that in the announcement that I'll be using iClicker to pull these responses. But there's a drop policy. I think it's you drop the 5 lowest ones. So if you don't, if there's a bunch of reasons why you might not attend lecture at a certain day, you can just take the automatic drops, and that's one way to kind of deal with that. There are these Canvas activities as well that are based on book reading. And so those will be due within every unit based on the chapter from that unit. The due dates are online. And then these Canvas activities are just, again, meant to help you through the chapter reading to help reinforce these ideas. But again, there's a generous drop policy. I think might also be drop 5 there. Check the syllabus to be sure. There are 5 homework assignments there. Because there's so few homework assignments, there's no drop policy, but there is a late policy. So if you turn them in late, it's 20% per day late. And that's because there's so few of them, I can't do a drop policy. But those are kind of the more important things, that kind of like to make sure you're doing the really fundamental, harder problems that we know we'll see kind of later on the final exam. And then the exams. And so I'll mention what a 2-stage exam here is, I think, in one of the next slides. But we've got these 2 exams that are these 2-stage exams, and then this final project, which is a group project, and then your lab assignment, so the lab reports. So if we drill down a little bit, so this is just a sample. I'm not doing one right now. Actually, this I thought I replaced this slide, but so I used to use a different way that students. Now I'm using iClicker this semester. I used a different the previous semester. This is an old slide, so I'll update this slide. I'm a little surprised that this one opened, but I guess I opened an older version. But But basically, there will be in the middle of the lecture, very often I'll just have slides like this, which will have the iClicker information and will prompt you to, to get out your iClicker apps, and then I'll ask a question that'll be based on that, and we'll get maybe 2 or 3 of those during a lecture. And if you complete a majority of those, they're graded for completion, not correctness, then you get your participation point for that day. So that's the basic idea there. The final project, I mentioned the group project. We saw groups of 4, but with instructor permission, with my permission, we can have smaller groups. But the idea here is that you're going to form your group, and this will happen after the midterm. And then there's this thing called input modeling that we'll learn what that means after the midterm. And you'll basically have to, so the idea is we're going to model a real world system. And so this sort of walks you through what we'll need to do with that real world system. And so you'll have to pick that real world system that you can gather data on. So it might be a Chipotle down the road. It might be a bank. It might be a factory that you have in your family. It might be an intersection. And so it's one of these things where you notice a potential operational problem that maybe could be investigated using simulation. And you'll go out to that system, you'll gather a little bit of data, and you'll be able to then make your simulation match the data from the real world, and then use your simulation to experiment on interventions you could have on that particular system. And so that input modeling report is where you'll propose to me what system you want to use and what data that you're going to gather. Then you're going to spend time in your group of 4 actually building that model. And then at the end of the semester, you'll form a video presentation uploaded to Canvas, and then upload a project report, a 4-page project report. It can have an appendix, but there's a particular format that I have up here, which will be this is on Canvas. So relatively short report that will summarize your findings. And then every individual student will be assigned a random presentation of another group to watch, and then fill out a rubric and leave some comments on. And then you'll score points for that, for doing your evaluation. And you'll be able to then see the evaluations from your peers. And then likewise, every individual student will be assigned a random evaluation or random report to read and evaluate as well, using a rubric. And so that's how the grades are distributed up around this final project. So it looks like 20%, but really the report is only 9% of your grade. The presentation is only 4% of the grade. And the input modeling report is easy to knock out. So there's a lot of easy points here. The peer evaluations, they're almost gimmies there. So that's in the formation of group. I mean, that's going to be just like, it'll just be, these are my 3 other group mates. And as long as everybody agrees when I go through that assignment, then there's no problem, and you get those points. And so, a generous drop policy, a lot of opportunities for these kind of easy credits. The other weird thing potentially about this, because how many people are familiar with 2-stage exams? Anybody done that in a high school or? All right, so 2-stage exam is something that I started to do several years ago, and as an alternative to retakes, and students seem to really like it. And so I've been doing it since in all my classes, and I had a lot of positive feedback. So if you have different feedback, I'm always happy to hear that. But the basic idea for both the midterm and the final is we're going to split the exam across 2 days. And so the first day, stage 1, was an individual-based exam where everybody takes the exam on their own without working with anyone else. It's closed book. You get some, you'll get some cheat sheets, like a 2-page cheat sheet sort of thing, your standard operation there. But you complete that on your own, and you then don't get your score or find out what the correct answers are. But then a couple of days later, you come back, and with access to anyone enrolled in the class, you can, as a group, take the exact same exam again, and possibly correct things, change things, and so on. And both of those get scored, the individual and the group. But your total exam score is 80% the individual and 20% the group. The way I do this is that these 2 days, and this will happen for both the midterm and the final, I will be here those lecture days. But you don't have to be. So basically, I'm going to give you at least a day to complete these. These are going to be Canvas-based, and we'll use Lockdown Browser for the individual one, just to help enforce the keeping it individual. But of course, no lockdown browser for the group one. And so you can come here to take the exam, or you can take it at home or wherever else you want, and just submit it. And again, I will be here during that in case you just want a quiet space to take it, so you can take it here. But then for the group one, I will also be here, but I'm not really proctoring at that point because you can talk to each other. So I'll basically be sitting here managing the room, but you could be up and moving around, talking to each other, however you want to use this space. Or you don't have to come in. You likewise can use, Discord or Slack or whatever to talk about these things. Again, I'll give you at least a day to submit with these both things. The stage one will be timed, so when you start it, you'll then have 75 minutes plus a little bit of bonus for the technical difficulties. The stage two will not be timed, so you can keep going back through it throughout at least that day, and they usually give a couple of days, and then to fix things. And then once stage two is completed, then I'll show everyone their scores. And this ends up being really useful for me because what I end up finding is that there's a bunch of difficult problems on stage one get fixed on stage two, but the ones that don't get fixed on stage two, those are the ones that sort of say, okay, those are the things that I need to maybe reinforce. So I don't waste time on the ones that end up being reinforced pretty quickly just by talking to your peers. So any questions about this stage one, stage two setup? Does that make sense? You don't have to work in a group for stage two. You can basically view it as almost like a retake where you get 20% of your score, or something like that. But you're free to work in a group, and usually usually benefits you to work in a group, even if you're the one giving all the correct answers out. And I don't want to pitch it that way, but even if you feel like you're explaining an answer to someone else, it usually helps reinforce it in your own head. Okay. Then other things, a minor thing, the naming conventions. So we have 5 homeworks, and they're named like this: homework B1. The lectures are also named like this, like lecture B1. Homework B1 represents the homework that is on the content that is available to you during that lecture. So it's like, this is when that homework is released. So homework B1 will cover topics that relate to lecture B1 and maybe the lecture or two before it. The Canvas activities, on the other hand, those are the ones that are based on the textbook. Those are named based on the due date. So the Canvas activity A2, that would be, you're expected to complete this before lecture A2. Now, all those due dates will also be on the calendar, but that's just sort of how the names fit with the lectures, how they kind of interdigitate. Other one is basic policy stuff. Make every effort to submit your stuff by the due date. There is an availability window. So basically, the only special case for this is homeworks, but any Canvas assignment and the lab reports, if you can get it uploaded to Canvas during the availability window, if Canvas lets you upload it, there's no late fee. It's only homeworks that if they're after the due date, then there's that 20% per day. But anything that's got a drop policy, the lab reports also have a drop policy. If I'll set a due date, but then I will set the availability window a little farther out. Usually, like, the due date will be 11:59, and the availability window will be 10 a.m. the next morning. So you don't, if you submit your thing at 12:01 a.m., you do not need to come to me and say, oh, am I going to get credit or anything like that? If Canvas let you upload it, you will get credit. So again, the only special case is that late penalty on the homeworks. But even in that late penalty on the homeworks, if it's 11:59, 12:01, I'm not going to assess a 20% late penalty for 2 minutes. I've had other faculty do a linear interpolation on late penalties, or what fraction of 20% is 2 minutes out of 24 hours. I think that's kind of crazy and a little sadistic, but there's some reasonable bounds, but just try your best to get things in by the due date. But otherwise, if you can get it into Canvas, don't worry about it. The availability window ultimately is what determines whether the thing gets in. Again, with the only special case being that homework assignment. Now, the final project is one other special, because those have to be peer reviewed. I really do need those in by the due date, because I then need to randomly assign them to all of the students. So those definitely have to get in, but that's kind of, that's like the ultimate special case there. But for the ICAs, for the lab reports, those sorts of things, if you get in by the availability window, you're fine. Excused absences, let me know in advance if you can. If it's a medical issue, let me know as soon as you're well. So, don't like say, oh, I was sick in week 3, but I forgot to tell you until week 7. Can I get an excuse for week 3? Like, well, if you've been attending weeks 4, 5, and 6, then it's hard. Like, I don't want to get a bunch of medical excuses all in week 15 just before the semester ends. Similarly, if there are religious observances or there's scheduled things, let me know as soon as possible. So if you know that you already know today that you're going to need to be out on October 16th for a university sanctioned event, let me know this week. So that I can put that excuse in there. Again, that just helps manage, my time. And I also helps me not miss things so that, I don't get a flood of kind of late, excuse claims in the last week of class. Other things, grade corrections. Once we get a grade back to you, you've got a week for corrections. After the week, then we generally don't want to do corrections. Again, this just manages things so that that last week of class, we can focus on the final projects and the final exams and not trying to do all of these corrections. And if you do request a grade change, note that there's the ASU policy is like if it's not about the merits of the assignment, then it's academic dishonesty, and I'm actually obligated to report it. So if you were to say, I know I did poorly on homework G4, but if I would just get 5 more percentage points, it would increase my grade and I'd get to, an extra, a bonus on my scholarship or something like that. That's academic dishonesty. So, and I have to report it. So if we made a mistake, absolutely come to me and or the lab TA and say, hey, I think this is mistakenly graded. We'll take care of it. But if it's like, it would be nice if my grade was higher for these reasons that have nothing to do with the course, I have to report that. Otherwise, don't upload any of the stuff that I distribute to you. It's copyrighted course material. And then even though your notes you own the copyright on them, ASU views it as academic dishonesty to sell your notes or post your notes without my permission. So although you're legally allowed to do those things, we view it as academic dishonesty. And so that's another one of those things I have to report. And then anything marked as an individual assignment, you're supposed to do on your own. Of course, you can ask your peers for help on general topics. Like, I didn't really understand what the difference between an event and a delay in Arena or something like that. Could you explain that to me? But if it's like, hey, could you give me another example that I could use on the homework for, what an event is, that would be going too far. Yeah, so any questions about that? Pretty clear? Okay. So like I said, this is what things will, so one of the things that I will periodically do in the middle of class, this is not at the attendance slide, is I'll put this up, and this just links to a Poll Everywhere submission site. So if you're in class and you'd like to ask a question, but you don't feel comfortable raising your hand, if you just go to that QR code or that link, which is also available on Canvas, right on the front page, you can submit your question anonymously, and I will do my best. I'm not doing it right now, I'm out of practice, but starting next week, I will do my best to monitor those questions as they come in. And if I don't answer them during class, I will then send an announcement out or a discussion post out afterwards to try to get to that. So if you feel uncomfortable asking questions directly, then feel free to submit them at this link. So again, I will pepper the slides with slides that look like this that will give you that, but again, you can always just go to Canvas and go to that. It's okay with me if you're using your digital devices. We're all adults. I use my phone all the time. I think it's crazy to ask you not to use your phone. It's a resource. So, I just don't be distracting to other folks around you. Don't be distracting to me. If it's clear that you're using it for an appropriate reason, then, I'm not going to like throw your phone out or something like that. Then the other thing is the iClickers thing. So this is the slide that I meant to show earlier. So basically periodically, and so we're not going to do an iClicker right now, But periodically we'll get slides that look like this, where I'll remind you of the web app, which you can access via your phone, or hopefully you've downloaded the iClicker app to your phone. But if you have your laptop, you can access the web app through there. And then as I ask these questions, as long as you're enrolled in the course, then it should show up on yours and you'll be able to answer those and get that credit. So if you haven't registered for iClicker and joined this class, make sure you do that. That'll be like an important thing before next week. So any questions about the iClicker? I think all but like 4 students already were registered in iClicker when I synced the roster. So I assume most of you have used iClicker. How many people have used iClicker in classes? Yeah, okay, good. 400 level class, expect that. If for some reason the digital infrastructure isn't working and I feel that we really need to, or isn't working for you, but is working for everyone else, then you can always just tear out a piece of paper, put your ASU right on one corner, the last 4 digits of your ASU ID number on another corner, put the responses in on paper, and then just drop it off to me at the end of class. So that's our contingency, but as much as possible, use the iClicker. Okay. And then yeah, check the syllabus. I know we're not supposed to say that in a negative way, and I'm not meant to say that there, but there's a lot of information in the syllabus. A lot of your questions will be answered that way. It saves time for me to answer questions that are not in the syllabus if you check the syllabus first, but definitely check out that syllabus. So where to go next? Again, register with iClicker, top priority. There are 2 Unit 0 activities that basically make sure that you check the syllabus and that you covered the material that's in this lecture, and then start reading chapter 1 of the Banks book, the lecture textbook. There is an ICA that will incorporate that, so look out for that first ICA assignment, which will be due before the corresponding lecture. So I forget if it's ICA A2. Let's say it's ICA A2. I forget if it's A2 or A1. I think it's A2, or maybe it's A3. Then that would mean that before lecture A3. So Tuesday will be A1, Thursday will be A2, the next Tuesday will be A3. Before that A3, then just do the ICA assignment or not. Remember, there's a generous drop policy on these ICAs. So you're going to get, you can see whatever, 12 ICAs or whatever, and I think I dropped 5. So, if you just have got other stuff to do that week and you feel like you're okay with the topic, don't feel like the assignments are opportunities for credit. So there are a lot of assignments that you should not feel that you have to do if there's a drop policy. Use the drop policy. That's meant to help you be as flexible as possible. I'm not expecting you to do all of them. If you have the time and you think it'd be helpful, and absolutely do all of them, but don't feel like you absolutely have to. I do not look negatively on anyone who's used the drop policy. That's just, I expect you to use it. And then lab 1. So lab 1 is next week. It corresponds to the stuff we'll be introducing in next week's lectures. And so take a look at lab 1, decide if you'd like to come to, it's a little unfortunate that they put the labs on Monday and Tuesday because you won't see me before the labs, but still I try to cover in the lab reading or the lab lecture all the stuff you need to complete the lab 1. We'll just end up rehashing a lot of that during the lectures. So any questions? Everything clear? All right, sorry for the boring lecture today. Appreciate your patience, and welcome back to those who were away, and hopefully the temperature stays low for a little while. And that's all I've got for you. So we'll see you next week. Have a good weekend.